everyone. Welcome to The Impact Architect. I'm Cheryl Mack, and for over 2 decades, I have been working with planning and producing global events with UN connected agencies all over the world. And, one of the biggest things that often comes up with these event productions is how to make it sustainable. These events are often happening during the backdrop of a major global event. And, we try to move the needle in with our onstage impactful moments. But when we're pulling back a little bit, we want to find out like, are these events really sustainable? Do the actions on stage match the actions that we're doing in the production of the actual event? I've often planning events during the Black backdrop of Climate Week, New York City. I've been doing this for, gosh, over 15 years. And when you're in New York City during Climate Week, it's the epicenter of global climate action. But when you're really looking at planning an event, you have to ask yourself, are we really planning a green event? And what does it mean to be a green event? So today I'm going to dive deeper into the blueprint of how I approach global events and making sure that they're sustainable. So I'm going to give you the blueprint. So first of all, I look at waste reduction. These events are often large scale and there's a lot of waste. So one of the first things that I want to typically do with these events is tackle waste reduction as much as possible and being strategic about how we're approaching that. So all of that planning happens before the first guest is even invited to the event. So one of the first things that, I think about doing is eliminating single-use plastic. So no plastic bottles, no single-use, paper cups. Try to use glassware as much as possible. But also when I'm selecting venues and working with the venue, I also want to make sure that we have ample water stations around the venue, and encouraging people to bring their reusable water bottles to the event. The second thing that I look at is the digital first approach. I want to make sure that we are providing digital platforms for everything, not printing out agendas, using apps as much as possible, and using QR codes for people to access agendas, and just trying to reduce the carbon footprint of the event by going as digital as possible. And then the last area as it relates to waste reduction centers around dun 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 signage. Everyone loves to print signs and make sure that, there's ample branding as much as possible. So taking that digital approach again, trying to use LED signage as much as possible. And when, kind of forced to actually print out any kind of signage, I want to make sure that it's evergreen signs that we can use, at multiple events or at the same event if it's annual. And if we have to use printed signage, that we're using recycled material or combustible. And sometimes if I'm actually able to be really savvy, I'll try to see if the signage can be used for artwork post-event. So then the next big item is around energy efficiency. These large events produce a lot of energy. And so, you're having a lot of people and a lot of big spaces. So, the energy consumption is massive. So to reduce energy usage, that's when it comes into play of proper venue selection. Try as much as possible to select venues that are that have LEED certification, or if they're using having trouble saying that word, to make sure that they're using renewable energy. And oftentimes venues, especially in New York City, are really confident about sharing this information on their energy efficiency. One of the other things that's also like a little trick that I use sometimes to reduce our energy usage is to try to find a venue with a lot of natural light, because then you don't require as much overhead lighting. And there are some beautiful venues in New York City and really around the world. I really try to find spaces that have like that 360 kind of appearance to it, with a lot of, windows is bringing in all of that great natural light to help light up the event. But even with all the great natural light, you still have a lot of stage lighting and audio visual equipment that you're using throughout the day. So, what do? So, one of the things that I do for lighting is to try to use LED lighting, and I also try to optimize my AV usage as much as possible. So, what does that mean when you're optimizing AV usage? Well, it's as simple as making sure that when the audiovisual is not being used, that is powered down. Sometimes you have to load in the night before, and you're testing the entire system. There's no need to leave everything on overnight, because that's just wasting energy. So, taking that kind of approach is definitely requires a lot of coordination with your audiovisual team to make sure that you're practicing energy efficiency. And if it's not being used and there's not going to be anybody in the room, and your production team can flip the switch on very easily, make sure that's a part of the coordination when you're planning in advance. So we've talked about energy efficiency, selecting venues. So the next thing that we're going to tackle is the virtual integration. So when you are planning your event, and if it's possible to bring in some of your speakers or your attendees to participate virtually, that's definitely going to reduce the need for travel for your speakers and attendees, and therefore reducing your carbon emissions, because you don't need flights, you don't need transportation. All you need is high-speed internet access, and you can make sure that everyone is being able to maximize engagement with the event, but they don't necessarily have to be in person. So can reduce that significantly. So the last key area is sourcing locally and reducing community impact. So sustainability isn't just about environmental impact, but it's also about local impact, local economic impact. I always make a concerted effort to source locally as much as possible, using local caterers, local florists, local vendors, because you're reducing, transportation, you're reducing, the flights if you're bringing people in locally, and it's also helping the local economy while you're reducing transportation emissions. And so that way, if you're doing these global conversations, you're able to invest in the community, that in the communities that are actually hosting these events, and not just always bringing all of your staff. And it's great to have our staff with us, but if we can source locally, that's really important, because the global climate events shouldn't just visit a city, it should leave some kind of positive impact behind. So when you're applying these strategies consistently across multiple events, you're creating gatherings that align with the values, with their execution, because we're talking about low carbon footprint as much as possible. And that's the responsibility of producing sustainable events. And that's the future of event production. It's really the intersection where strategy and sustainability meet. And it's exactly the kind of things that we'll be talking about here on the Impact Architect. So let me ask you, what sustainability challenges are you facing with your events? Drop your questions in the comments below, and I'd love to dig into solutions with you. So if you like the video, just hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and tune in where we're going to start digging in deeper into these sustainability issues with events, and how do you really create an impactful event, because I'm the impact architect. So see you in the next episode. Thanks.